All right, all right. Welcome back to the channel, Gods and Goddesses in Training. It is Uncle Makara, all relations. Background is still from the Nixa channeling. I hope you guys are really enjoying yourselves and having an incredible day. Today is a Venus Day, a Friday, so I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic that I want to share with all of you. And it's the idea of whether peak performers are haunted or not, okay? Are they haunted? Is there something else to know primarily about peak performers that we can actually learn and get more acquainted with, right? In this understanding, because
Here's the rant, raw and un.
all right. So once we get this, we will really start to go into this truth, this deep truth that everyone worships peak performance like it's some kind of a holy grail, right? There's biohackers, there's like dopamine detoxes, there's 5 a.m. clubs and alarms early in the morning, there's productivity trackers, there's, Sigma Grand said the Grando stab, baby, right? It's all of this at once, right? This is this industry. But the paradox of life is this: the harder you cling to peak, the further you drift from flow. And I've had to learn this the hard way through being a workaholic and actually trying to push and grind and hustle. And all right. So yeah, that was the AI, if you heard that woman. I was going, let me give you the raw truth. Okay, or whatever it was saying. All right. So where was I? Yeah, so what I'm talking about here is really the understanding of if you have this primary way of looking at peak performance, it has got to change after a while, right? Because you stay long enough in this industry and you start to notice that peak performance is almost like a mountain summit, right? Like a mindset that you're climbing harder, you're sweating more, you're like dominating the terrain, right? But flow, on the other hand, is like a river consciousness or ocean consciousness. So it moves where it wants, it adapts, it bends, it carves stone without effort, right? So peak is about the control and flow is about the surrender. But the true masters realize that you need both, right? The mountain teaches you the discipline and the river teaches you the transcendence or surrender. So the eclectic key here that most people miss, right, is that flow state isn't about maxing out your willpower, it's actually dissolving the ego's grip. Okay? So that means that epigenetically, when you're in flow, your body literally remodels itself, right? So that means stress genes dim down, repair genes activate, right? Neurochemicals like dopamine, adrenaline, endorphins, and anandamide synchronize. So this is not all woo-woo, right? It's applied epigenetic remodeling in action, and you're literally rewriting your cellular symphony every time when you stop forcing and you start riding the waves of life. So peak performers often burn out because they confuse fixation with focus, right? Because fixation or obsession is kind of like white knuckling it, right? You grip the wheel until your knuckles bleed. But focus in flow state is more like Bruce Lee's "be like water, my friend," right? Is the idea that the Shaolin didn't become legendary by grinding spreadsheets and, working at a 9 to 5 job. They merged play, rhythm, combat, breath, and spirit until their practice itself dissolved their own egos and dissolved them in a sense, right? So they became the Shaolin. They became merged with that craft, right? And there was no separation eventually. So here's a fun little mystical curveball, right? A lot of ancient cultures, as always, understood better than flow better than Silicon Valley, right? And this is really important because once we have this realization that the Sufis had Sama, right, the whirling dance of trance, the Vedic rishis had Lila, the cosmic play, the Taoists had Wu, right? Wu is effortless action, effortless effort. Burning Man creates this yearly with their gift-based economy, right? Art, chaos, dust, storms, ecstatic surrender, whatever. And all of it is just a training ground in letting go of fixation and rediscovering play as the actual engine of your creativity. Okay? Let me just check the chat. All right. Hey there, Ellie. All right. Hey there, Jen. Okay. All right. Jen, I prefer you don't use hearts because I think my girlfriend minds. Okay. I'm not too sure. I can't read her mind, but just making it a note for next time. Um, Modern neuroscience confirms this, right? So flow state is actually a hypofrontal condition, right? So parts of the prefrontal cortex, like your inner critic, the timekeeper, they go offline. So you stop micromanaging your reality, and suddenly it's like you're 5 times faster, right? 5 times more creative. Well, 500 times in a sense, right? That's what the studies show. But peak performers who cling to control hit ceilings. Those who let go into flow break those ceilings. Are we seeing the difference here, guys? Because there is some kind of an overlap, right, that we want to understand. And how do peak performers become more flowing, right? How does someone who is pushing, hustling, struggling get more into this lifestyle of flow? Well, it's very simple. Are they being conscious? Are they connecting to their breath? Are they grounding themselves throughout the day? Right? It's very, very simple. Like you've got to trade force for rhythm instead of grinding 8 hours straight, right? They pulse, they rest, they breathe, they create. So actually, you're ritualizing the fun, right? The nervous system unlocks when joy is actually more present. And play is not a childish thing, it's actually a very primal thing, right? And it's how lions train to hunt. So that means that peak performers practice surrender, right? Which is a really difficult thing for most peak performers to do, especially if you're a narcissist or a sociopath, right? You have this thing in the background that I constantly have to protect my social mask, right? I constantly have to protect myself in this social environment, and so I cannot fully show, my true, raw, authentic self, and it drives people insane, right? Because you constantly have to put on this you have this extra fatigue of the persona, the persona fatigue, but then you also have judgment fatigue. So it's like it's a real curse that a lot of peak performers they put themselves in. But when you're in meditation, you're doing ecstatic movements, maybe you're martial arts sparring, anything that forces your ego to dissolve, definitely do that, right? You see a lot of these David Goggins guys, right, online, and you hear them and you're like, I don't train my body, I train my mind, right? It's kind of cringe, but it's actually true, right? It's actually true. So we are actually training our mind, right? Because when you're doing yoga, your mind gets more flexible. When you're going to the gym all the time, your mind gets tougher, right? It's the actions that you do actually reflect back to your mental construct because all is mind and this is a mental universe. So the real secret here is flow isn't something you chase, it is something that you allow. Okay? I'm not trying to chase the peak every time I make with these videos, or I'm not trying to hit that, one sweet spot. It's like I'm allowing and I'm flowing and I'm letting go and I have my notes, but I don't need to stick to them all the time. And I can break out of the paradigms, right? And I can create new ones and then I can zoom in and zoom out and, adapt while the matrix is giving me more data. Right? How am I supposed to know someone else if they're not giving me any data, right? Like if you're talking to someone and then there's no data, right? How are you going to know how to impact that person or move it forward in some way? You're not going to know. You're just going to take blind guesses and assumptions, right? And blind guesses and assumptions don't get the job done, unfortunately. So that's why peak performers eventually have to humble themselves. They realize their obsession with metrics, hacks, and control was actually keeping them at the summit of one mountain, right? And this is the thing with like me studying Tony Robbins and all these peak performers for so many years. This is the loophole that I've noticed, right? Flow is the river waiting to carry them into entire valleys that they didn't even know existed. And here they are stuck on this one minuscule task, right? So this is the real paradigm shift that we have to cause as a culture is we've got to realize what is true peak performance, okay? Because usually peak performance is when you're feeling your best and performing your best, but usually it's just about results in the modern world, right? So the next time you sit to perform, don't ask, how do I force my peak? You ask, how do I design my play? Okay? Because when you drop the fixation and you're just riding the river, your biology, your creativity, your spirit, they're all conspiring to carry you further than the grind set ever could. Because most performers are trauma driven machines. Their obsession with achievement didn't start from joy, it started from pain, guys. A parent they could never impress, a childhood where love was conditional, a voice inside that tells them, if I stop, I'll be worthless. That's why they push harder than everybody else. Not because they're inspired, guys, but because they're haunted by their past. And here's the catch, right? Trauma fueled drive works up to a point. It creates CEOs, athletes, surgeons, founders, even the CIA, right? But it's a survival energy. It's adrenaline, it's cortisol, it's hypervigilance. It builds empires, but it also builds burnout, also builds emptiness and broken nervous systems, right? So we're playing with fire here. It's like running your life on jet fuel. It's very impressive firepower, but it will scorch you from the inside out. So this is why thriving requires a shift from running away from the wound to running towards the vision until the wound becomes a womb, an opening, a birthway, right? A way that it's born or regenerates flow, right? From the survival stress to a regenerative flow. So from I will prove them wrong, right? Which is coming from spite, which is still a flow state, and you can still get the energy moving with that, to I'll live what's right for me. Okay, I'll live what's right for me. So this is the big shift in the change. And it requires this. How do you move from surviving to thriving? First of all, you have to name the trauma engine. You have to ask yourself, what ghost am I really running from? Whose voice am I still trying to silence with my success? Awareness is the first severance, right? And then you rewire your nervous system. Survival mode is fight or flight. Thriving is ventral vagal safety. Somatic theory, play, meditation, breath work. These reprogram the body to know that it's safe to succeed without tension. So a lot of the practices that I give my clients and different people who work with me is I get them to feel through the fear. One of the greatest activities that I give them is, well, there's one where people feel very suppressed in their expression. A really good one to do is the bowstring exercise, where you kind of lean back and you start shaking, and your body's naturally going into this kind of panic state, right? Because you feel like you're going to fall. And so your body naturally brings up the fear, the cortisol, the adrenaline, all of the fear in your body. And I actually tell them to breathe through it from their belly, to remind themselves that it's okay, that they're actually fine, that this is just the body recreating that system of the panic and the panic attack or the anxiety attack or whatever they're going through. It's just recreating that feeling And as they're able to shake it out while breathing, they actually feel calmer. And there's an energy that gets unbound and it frees up this communication channel over here. This entire midsection gets opened up, right? So that's just one example I'm giving you guys, but there's countless like this where you just allow your nervous system to gain attraction, not attraction, right? Traction, like in terms of a kind of a direction that it's moving towards, right? And redefining success as nourishment instead of what achievements that leave you empty. You're building the rhythms that feed you, that fill you up with life force, that give you drive, right? So sleep, relationships, art, rest. Thriving means you succeed and feel fuller, not emptier, right? So you're channeling the fire into the flow to create smoke. Trauma gave you intensity. Don't waste it, right? But refine it. Instead of compulsive grind, direct it towards creative states where you're pulled by joy, not pushed by fear. Okay? So the paradox is trauma forged the blade, but at some point you got to stop cutting yourself with it and learn to wield it with mastery. Okay? And ask yourself today, if I wasn't trying to prove anything, what would I create just for the joy of it? If I had nothing left to prove in this world, what would I create just for the joy of it? That's where thriving begins. You see? It's quite simple. And it does sound brutal, but that's this world. That's peak performance industry for you, right? The inner critic is louder for peak performers because that's the damn voice that built them. The average person's critic whispers, don't embarrass yourself, right? A peak performance critic, a high peak performer, a high level peak performance critic screams, you are nothing unless you dominate. That voice has been weaponized since childhood, maybe in a military home or something like this, right? And the echo of the parent who only praised straight A's and the coach who only nodded at victory and a culture that told you your worth was measured in output, right? That A's, you always have to get straight A's, right? Growing up. So peak performers aren't free. They're haunted by their inner critic, and every achievement isn't celebration, it's just a temporary silence of that demon in the head. One day of peace, and then the voice returns. Do more, be more. Not enough yet. That's why Olympians collapse after the gold. That's why someone wins the lottery and they get fucked up. Because their nervous system isn't ready for that. So this is why we train the nervous system to relaxing towards our goals. Relax it towards your purpose, your mission. If you can imagine, I'm living in this location, let's say, behind me, right? Can I relax into this? Can I just truly enjoy this location? Or am I going to still be in this micromanaging mode? You see this all the time with family, right? When they go on vacation and stuff. Ellie says, yes, I can confirm that. Awesome. You know when you go out on a vacation and then it's like, oh my goodness, like you go with someone on a vacation and then they're still worried about how late they are, like what the room is gonna be like, why the sunlight isn't coming into the room. They'll always find something to complain about, right? And it's like, yo, it's fine. You're here to enjoy yourself. You're not here to give yourself more tasks, right? You're not here to give yourself more different things in your mind to worry about, right? Oh, uh, Ellie's messaging me to call her baby. Okay. What's up, baby girl? All right. Do more, be more. Not enough yet, right? That's the voice in the head. And This is why we've got to understand that when the critic isn't fed, the performer doesn't know who the hell they are. So here's the paradox. You cannot actually kill the critic. That voice is hardwired. So trying to silence it is like trying to drown the ocean. The key is alchemy. Feed the critic into your drive. And this has been one of the best mechanisms and way forward for me is I turn that insult into a fuel, right? Because it is only like I will know if I'm triggered by something if I start reacting to that thing, right? Really heavily. And then I'll notice like this is not a natural reaction. This is not a natural way that I would respond to someone, right? This seems like a chili temper or something like this, right? This seems like not a normal way that I would express myself, let's say. So this is where we get this understanding of when your inner critic, you know, spits out that you're not ready, you answer good. That means I get to sharpen. So, you use it as a compass, is what I'm saying, not a cage. If it's screaming, there's a gap, you fill the gap, right? You change the voice's job. And right now, it's the prison guard. So you redefine it as the trainer. Instead of letting it shame you, command it. Hey, instead of you criticizing me, why don't you point out my weak links so I can actually get stronger? And suddenly the critic becomes, oh, okay, I guess. And it starts becoming a ruthless coach, right? Because when you separate your worth from work, right, that's when you get your power back. The critic thrives on tying your identity to results and output. So it's trying to tether you more into this material world. You cut that cord because you're already enough, but the critic keeps you sharp, right? This shifts it from the parasite to a sparring partner because if you've heard criticism growing up, why are you not doing this right? Why aren't you doing this? Why is that not okay? Right? You're constantly hearing this. You're like, dude, like after a while you just forget, right? But it still stays subconsciously. So you don't fight it. You set boundaries with the beast. You don't let it run 24/7. You ritualize it. You journal its rants in the morning and then you close the book. You rip out that page, right? You tell it you get 30 minutes a day of ranting on this. After that, I'm in flow. And peak performers need to know when to drop the sword, right? The critic is just the shadow of your potential. Because the louder it screams, the bigger your gift. Do you guys get that? Give me a thumbs up on this video if you get that, because the inner critic is like the dragon, right? And when I say it's like the dragon, it's okay, babe. When I say it's like the dragon, right? It's the one who drags on. Every dragon guards treasure. But peak performers who learn to tame that, how to train your dragon, right? How to train your ego more so. They stop being victims of the voice and they become alchemists who turn that poison into propulsion. So the next time your critic roars, you don't collapse. You don't numb it with distraction. You stare it down and you say, good, you just showed me where I need to train. Now watch me turn your insult into my fire. All right. So you're adjusting the inner voice and personalizing it for you. You're not making it a criticism, you're making it constructive criticism. You're letting it build you. And you're understanding it's coming from somewhere. It's coming from a fear, an inner worry, something like this, right? So you just have to kind of acknowledge that because most people think peak performance is just neurochemistry and hustle, right? Dopamine spikes, grit, willpower, habit loops. But anyone who's really danced at the edge knows that there's something darker and stranger lurking beneath it, right? That high achievement can actually be an invocation, that you push yourself far enough into the red zone and you're not just training muscles, you're opening doors now. Because the esoteric truth is that peak performance is a ritual state. Okay? And when you hack focus to the limit, when you dissolve fear and you blast adrenaline, you're tearing holes in ordinary consciousness. And those holes don't just let flow come in, they can also let entities creep in. Think about it. Like, why do so many elite performers, right? Rock stars, founders, athletes crash into addictions, breakdown, voices in their head? Why do so many geniuses talk about muses, daimons, or the zone? Like it's presence that overtakes them. Because it is. The Greeks were honest. They said inspiration comes from a daimon. The Christians demonized it, right? The shamans dance with it, but the peak performers often stumble into it blind. And entities feed on intensity. Trauma-driven overachievers generate that intensity nonstop. So every time they whip themselves with the inner critic, every time they push past exhaustion, they're generating energy that something can latch onto. And that voice in your head saying, not enough, not enough, not enough. Sometimes that's just a trauma loop, but sometimes it's a parasitic hitchhiker milking your drive for its own feast. So it's not all bad. Yes, some entities are muses, archetypal intelligences that ride you into your brilliance, right? Tesla spoke of visions downloading in his mind. Mozart said the entire symphonies arrived complete for him. Michael Jordan's zone felt like he wasn't even playing. Something else was. These are empty rides too, but not exalted ones. So yes, peak performers can get haunted. The grind, the trauma, the sleepless tunnel vision, it thins the veil. What slips in depends on your discipline and your intention. Without awareness, you are risk becoming a battery for hungry spirits. With awareness, you can turn the same state into possession by genius. So here is how you can keep it sovereign. You ground your nervous system daily. You flow without regulation is like a possession factory. So you have to breathe, roar, and integrate. You set very spiritual boundaries, just like athletes have coaches, mystics have guardians, prayer, visualization, mantras, not superstition, but sovereignty signals, right? Consciously invoking, don't just unconsciously leak. Call on archetypes, deities, and muses with intention before you perform. Don't leave your door open for whatever wants to squat in your psyche. Decide, I want, Oshun's energy before this practice. You have to decide, right? And that decision is so important. That intention is so important. Otherwise, some other being is going to take its place. Okay? So transmute survival drive into a thriving fire. If your achievement engine is still trauma fed, entities will gorge on it. When it's joy fed, then you notice the higher allies are arriving, right? And once the higher allies are arriving, man, everything starts to shift and change. At least for me, it has. So peak performance is not just biohacking, it's ritual magic, and you are summoning forces bigger than yourself every time you hit the zone. The only question is, are you being haunted by the past and parasites, or are you riding with the gods, right? Most people think peak performers is just neurochemistry and hustle, right? Like I said. So here's what we got to do. We got to understand how this all works, right? And day by day, if we look at this, we can really start to plan out a proper mechanism for this. Now, what I've done is, I don't know if I can find it, is I took my astrology, my Western astrology and Vedic astrology, and I plugged it into the GPT bot, and basically I got it to create a character for me, right? That helps me to create the most epic remnants of that, right? Like, let me see if I can pull it up or find it. Um, and that's how I got towards this thing yesterday too, about the static is death, ecstatic is life thing. If you guys saw that post, um, that's like one of my understandings is like the word static and ecstatic, right? Ecstasis is actually out of body, right? If you think about it really. Um, so what was the thing I said? Yeah, so basically I just gave my chart and then it was saying something like I can guarantee I wrote it down. Don't collapse into animal compulsion or ascetic denial. Walk the razor's edge. I take these little notes sometimes. Let's see here. You cannot out hustle a belief system. You have to dismantle it. No, it's not this one. You know, I've realized our blessings and progress are blocked when you keep looking at your life through old wounds. You have to let in more light, you know, block the toxic people and even the self-sabotage. You know, you kind of have to protect your mind and space because otherwise, yeah, they're going to affect the way that you're thinking, right? And so the main takeaway here is you got to protect your thinking from distorted lenses. All right. Anyway, I can't find it right now, guys, but I'll share with the adepts. Let's get it today. I hope you guys have an incredible rest of your day. May the flow be with you. Okay, stay strong, stay resilient. And whenever there is an issue, whenever there's a problem, just know that you can always transmute it. You can always find the light at the end of the tunnel. You can always find the silver light, right? That is shimmering. You can always find the brighter way of doing something. There's always a moment away from momentum. Flow state is just a decision, it's a choice, right? And when you can decide, I want to tap in right now, I want to take back my own power, I want to stand for something, I want to have a drive, a compelling future that I move towards, right? Something that keeps me going and wake up. Like, ask yourself, what would make me wake up today? Very early, right? Like what would make me wake up in the morning, even though I don't follow this datum, right? I'm telling myself what excites me today. What can I create new? Because yesterday I had drawn this, right? Now today I'm going to be tapping into something else, maybe music, right? So it's not like one set way that I have to do this. Like today is doesn't even feel like a work day to me. Even though it can be, it can turn into a work day because I have clients, right? So this is the thing. You always have to find a way to pivot and render, right? Render different renditions is what I mean. Okay? So whenever there's a different rendition or a different way of doing things, right? You don't do it this way, you find a rendition, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, right? And so forth. So once you can get that, you realize that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, right? And once we calm ourselves down with this rampant mind and we realize that we have 48,000 negative thoughts a day or something, we got to give ourselves much more, calm and compassion and positivity and positive thoughts, actually. Once we know that it's that bad and negativity loops like a habit, then we just got to call it out. And we just got to ease our bodies and minds and realize that there's actually something fun going on, right? And we're in the creation of that fun. So this is where peak performance becomes peak presence, where you stop making it a performance and a push and a thriving, and more so an effortlessness and ease, right? A relaxation, a letting go. And it's a huge difference because nature does not hurry, yet everything gets accomplished. Lao Tzu, right? Let's get it today. Upward Spiral Gang, thank you so much for tapping in. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. Ask me any questions to refine. Let's get it today. Us, let's win. Peace, guys. Have a great Friday. Friday. Okay. Have a great Friday. Let's get it today.